Hey guys, welcome back. This is just going to be a real quick tip video. And what I'm going to show you today is going to be how to sharpen your awls. We did a hand stitching video on using an awl and 2 needles. So if you want, you can sure reference that. We've got the link down in the description for that video. One of the biggest questions most people have is how do you sharpen these? These awls can be tricky to sharpen. There's a lot of different ways to do it. This is the best way that I found to do it, and I actually got a little bit of tip on sharpening these from Aaron at Makers on how to sharpen the edgers, and we'll do a video on that as well on how to sharpen those. But through learning how to do that, I figured out a better way to sharpen these awls. I used to use just a file. Here we're still going to use a file, but we're going to change it up just a little bit, and it makes it really, really easy to keep these sharp and do a good job. Like I said, there's probably other ways of doing it, and you can sure check those out or use whatever works for you, but this is how I do it, and I'm going to show you how to sharpen your stitching awls. Alright, so here's a few things that you're going to need when it comes to sharpening your awls. I've got 2 awls. I usually keep 2 on my bench. I've got one that's usually for horns and for smaller type stitching, and those usually end up being awls that I've had for a while and that I've sharpened many times, and so they've gotten thinner. Now you can obviously, when you can see the thickness change in these, as far as this one's a lot wider than this one. Now, when you first get these awls, there's a lot of places to get them. I'm not going to name off anybody because I just kind of buy the little Osborne awls wherever I can find them. But I'm sure there's some guys that are making really nice awl blades. But when you get these, you can really doctor on them and get them as thin as you want. Be careful that you don't take off so much meat that they bend really easy, especially if you're doing saddle work, because these things will bend and break on you if you get them if you take too much of the integrity off by sharpening them too thinly. But the other thing that we use is my main thing, the thing that I've kind of changed up, is using emery cloth. And I just got this at Lowe's. You can get emery cloth wherever, from wherever you want to get it. This seems like to be pretty good stuff. Some places don't even carry emery cloth, or they carry sanding paper. But I would definitely recommend the emery cloth over any kind of sanding paper. This stuff here actually has a fabric on the back of it. It's actually like a fabric. It's not a paper, so it doesn't tear. They come in really, really fine grits. This little pack here has got a number of different grits. I'm using, it's got some coarser ones and stuff. I probably won't use those for much other than just general sanding. This one here, I'm not sure the grit number on it, but it's very fine. You can see in there, it's not very coarse at all. And you could probably do like anything else, start out with something like this and step it down to, super, super fine grit and polish them off really well. In the grand scheme of things during the day, I usually do one and then roll with that. The next thing I'll have is a file. This is just a flat bastard file, and I used to just use the file, a good file, and then just go along here and sharpen all 4 sides. These awl blades, when you look at an awl blade, you'll see that you've got a plane here, plane, and then on the other side 2 planes. So you basically have 2 cutting surfaces along the edge, and then this top. That's what makes the diamond point, like we talked about in the hand stitching video, when you punch through. So just like in the hand stitching video, you've got a cutting surface on each side of that, and that makes a diamond hole. And so when you punch that hole, it makes a diamond. That's what you want. And so you'll line those up in that manner when you're stitching, so that those diamonds are at an angle through your stitch gouge. If you've got a gouge in your stitch line to stitch groove, that you're stitching in, you want those diamonds at an angle. So that's what we're going to be sharpening, basically, is the 2 edges of that. And so we want to keep those straight, but that's kind of just a touch on that. Then what we'll do is we'll end up polishing with paper. This is another tip, a part of that tip, same tip I got from Aaron at Makers, but this is just a really high-end drawing paper. So it's usually a cotton fiber, archival, acid-free. You can buy this kind of paper at Hobby Lobby or anywhere else, but you want a good quality drawing paper, and that's what you'll use. And then I've put just a black polishing compound on there. You could certainly use green or red, whatever polishing compound you would like, but it just rubs some of that onto the paper, and that's what we'll use to polish these blades when we're done sharpening them. And then I usually keep a ball of beeswax on my bench, and when I'm stitching, not so much when I'm hand stitching, say, a little wallet or something really small where the leather's thin, I usually don't have to worry about this. But if I'm stitching, say, a horn or a candle binder that's got a lot more material in there that I'm having to go through, just a little stab into that beeswax, wipe off any kind of clumpy excess, and that will really help just that needle to work its way through, and to where you're not having to just really force it through the material the whole way. It just helps to lubricate the awl as it's going through there. And so I really like to use some beeswax. If your awl's right, probably don't need it. But like I said, for me, as much as I sew candles and stuff like that, I try to make my job as easy as possible. And if a little beeswax doesn't hurt anything, I'm going to use it. So what we're going to do is, like I said, I'm going to use this emery cloth. That's the one of the changes that I made to the way I sharpen these awls. But what I'll do is I'll take the flat file, and stick it on there, onto the emery cloth, and I just kind of pinch it around there and hold it. You can see how this emery cloth is really worn, where I've used it already a bunch. And I'll hold the blade against my bench like so, and then you can take this and just really lightly and gently just push away along that awl, along the cutting side here. So I'm at that angle here. If we take this off so you can see, I'm at an angle along with this left side of the cutting surface. And then we'll come back here and we'll go upward angle to get the right side cutting surface. Then we'll spin the awl over and do the same to the other side. So we're going down and then up on the other side. And that's getting the outer edges there. The nice thing with the emery cloth is that it doesn't take off as much material. A lot of these files will just really grind off material in a much harder fashion, and I want to keep it smooth so that I don't have to buff it, because I don't buff my awl blades on a buffing wheel. I think it tends to round the cutting edge and makes them to where they don't cut very well, and I don't really like that. So I want a sharp cutting edge here. And so I'm going to start at the base of that awl, hold my angle just like a knife or anything else. You want to hold that angle, whatever angle you're working with, you want to hold that all the way through the pass, so all the way to the end. And you don't want to snap off the end, because if you snap off of the tip of that, you're rolling that tip. So you want to kind of follow through, you know, kind of keep going so that you're not snapping off the end of your awl. And then I'll come here and do the other side, and I kind of turn my awl to where now this other cutting edge is horizontal, and then I can just follow that angle. And as you're doing this, you can look at your awl blade and you can see you know, how your sanding is going, because you're basically just really finely sanding this edge. And so you can look at that blade and see where the shiny is. Where it's real shiny, you haven't hit it with the emery cloth yet. Where you see really fine scratches and kind of fresh metal there, that means you're hitting it. So that'll kind of guide you as far as where you are. And you want this middle spine of this awl blade to run straight down the middle. If it gets to where it's veering towards the tip, if it's starting to veer left or right, that means that you've taken more meat off of the opposite side. So you want to kind of keep that centered up going down the middle. And that'll just help that awl pass through in a straight manner. If you've got an awl to where when you're going through thick material, it keeps veering left or right through and it's not coming out the other side where you think it should be, it may be part of that. It may be some of that awl is not in line anymore and now it's crooked. And so you need to go back and straighten that center spine up on that awl blade so that it'll pass through the material straight. Sometimes you might prefer them to curve just a little bit, and that's part of fine-tuning your awl blades to work for you. And so I don't know if you can see it real good in the video, but all of that material has been sanded. And so I'm not going to get too crazy because we don't want to roll that edge off to the other side. We just want to buff it down with this emery cloth and get it to where it's, you know, it's not rolled anymore and it's not smooth. We want it to be sharp. So now we'll go to the other side and do the exact same thing. And I'm not pushing super hard. I'm letting the emery cloth do the work. But the nice thing with this file in there is that it gives you a flat surface to keep you straight. And then holding the awl against the bench, make sure that that's stationary. And then so as you go, it's easier to stay at a proper angle instead of trying to, you know, roll it around or getting off or anything like that. You want to keep that same angle. Just like sharpening a knife, you want to maintain that angle. That's the trick. And you would be surprised at how little it takes of doing this just periodically. Especially if you're in a saddle shop, if you're doing a lot of cannels and stuff like that. You may not need to do it on every cannel or every horn that you sew, but maybe once a week, get a cup of coffee and sit down and just buff it off just a little bit with a little emery cloth. And you'll be real surprised at how much easier your awls will pass through that material. And so you saw me, I kind of flipped over a couple times and went back. It's kind of like a knife. You'll go 3 or 4 times one direction on the stone, 3 or 4 times the other direction, and then once you think you're getting close, you go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, kind of just to keep that blade in line. And I'm doing the same thing there. So now both of those cutting surfaces have been tuned down, and so now they should be good. Like I said, if you're wanting to thin your awl blade, keep going. Be sure you're maintaining that angle. It's going to take a little bit longer, but you'll take off material and begin to thin this blade widthwise as you go. And it might take you some time to get it to the thickness that you want. But I don't usually worry about using the bigger ones for my cannels. I probably should thin them down, but I like having the stability of that awl that's not going to break. And then I've got an older, thinner one for my horns where I can get more of a dainty looking stitch. And so now that we've got our sanding done, we'll put our emery cloth over, and then we'll get the paper. Now you can get a bigger piece. I was using this for edgers, and so it's not, I'd rather have it bigger like that one so it kind of wraps around, just helps you hold it in there. But for this demonstration, we'll go ahead and just use this piece here. I tend to lose them. They look like trash on my bench, so they end up going in the trash. But you can save one of these and use a piece of paper for multiple times. But it's just got that black polishing compound on there. And we're going to do the exact same thing, but just with this paper. And just like if we were sanding it, but right now actually what we're doing is buffing it. So you could, I guess, maybe some guys do, you go to a buffing wheel, put some polishing compound on it and buff that thing off. I find that the buffing wheel is far too aggressive for awl blades and swivel knife blades. I do not put my swivel knife blades on a buffing wheel. My experience is that it rolls that edge, and then I go back where I was before I sharpen the thing. So I just don't like that. And so I buff, or I strop my swivel knife blades, and this is pretty much the same thing here that we're doing with the paper. And it's much less aggressive, and we're just polishing that sharp edge and maintaining it. We're not trying to roll that edge, and you have less chance of doing that with a hands-on method like this than you do on a buffing wheel. Not to mention, I've had that awl blade catch in a buffing wheel before, and it'll scare the bejesus out of you because it'll fly around a bit, and that sucker right there will go in you after you get done sharpening that, rolled edge or not. And so I just kind of buff it off, really focusing on the tip of the awl blade because that's your initial cutting surface, is the tip. So just be sure that that is nice and polished and sharpened, like when you're going with the emery cloth. Be sure you get the tip of that blade nice and sharp. And now, if you can see in the video, it is super shiny. There's no more bare metal looking scratched up metal. It's very, very shiny, and you keep doing this, till you're happy with it, and then it should just very easily. I mean, that's a piece of 910, and so just with very little pressure and a little bit of wiggle, it goes right in there. And so if you've got a little hang up, you can continue to buff it off with that. But like I said, I'm usually going through such thick stuff that I'm not too worried about it. Just a little bit of beeswax. You don't want big clumps of beeswax on the tip of your awl blade because it'll just fill the hole with beeswax, and then when your stitch material or your thread comes through there, it'll pick up that beeswax and it can make it unsightly. Plus beeswax, if it's really worked into the grain of the leather when you go to oil it, it won't oil real well there. So I try not to use too much beeswax, just a little bit, and then you can really see how much easier that slid through there. And I don't do it every stitch hole. I may do it, every 6th or 8th one or something like that. But I would do the same thing to this blade here, exactly the same way we did it. So that's my method for sharpening a stitch awl. I'm sure if you're really good at it, you could probably do it on a whetstone or something, but I prefer to just use a file, piece of emery cloth, and then a piece of paper, good quality art paper, not copy paper, you'll rip right through it, but a nice heavy drawing graphite paper, and then some black compound on there. and you can really get your awls nice and shaped up and make your hand stitching experience much easier. Alright guys, so that's our quick tip video. Real quick on these awls, the Hafts. This is just a C.S. Osborne awl haft. I really like this one. I've used, I don't know, I've had a bunch of these over the years, and I use them until they kind of get loose and sloppy, and then I'll chunk them and get another one. They're fairly inexpensive. This one here is a Barry King. You can sure get on his website and order one of these. I really like this one, especially for binders. That's why I've got the bigger awl in there. Is because the back end of this thing is very big, and so if you stitch a lot of binders, horns aren't so bad, but a lot of candle binders on saddles, you can really wear a blister in the palm of your hand from pushing that awl through there, especially if your blade's not very sharp. And so Barry's done a really nice job of making a really smooth, rounded awl haft that's very comfortable in your hand. It also has a flat spot on one side. I've had so many questions, and I was one that asked one too, the guy when I was learning to build saddles, why he always ground one side of his, a lot of his tools. He'd grind that one spot flat on there. Often wondered why. Main reason is when you set it on a bench, if it does roll, it'll roll to the flat spot and it won't roll off your bench. Usually, they still will. But I haven't done it to this one, but you can sure just take it on a sander and just sand off a flat spot on one side. A lot of times that'll help you too, is to know what direction your awl is. Another trick that I'll show you too, almost all of your awls will have a little pin there. That pin is what locks in this apparatus here into the wooden haft. And so I usually line up one of my cutting edges with that pin. And that way when it's in hand and this is in there, I know if that pin is on top, I know what plane that blade is. You can also do the same thing, because I stitch with a lot of jerk needles, and they're just basically a needle. It's got a little hook on the end of them. They come out of a Landis stitcher. I use these when I sew my candle binders. I'm doing a lock stitch like a sewing machine, and I go through, hook a loop, pull that out, run my end through there, and then pull the stitch tight. I will line that up, that hook up with that pin as well. So when I'm through the candle, I don't have to constantly be looking under to know where that hook is. If that pin's up, then the hook is facing away from me and I can hook that thread on there. Just a little trick to let you know how to. Barry's doesn't have that, but you could certainly use that flat surface as a marker as far as to how your blade's facing. I normally will put my blade in there to where it's facing to the left side of that flat spot. So if my thumb's on here and I'm pushing that through, I know that blade is facing this plane here, because one edge is at the edge of this. So. But if you want one of these awl blades or awl hafts, they're really nice. I think his also come with blades, and he's probably got really nice blades. I can't remember if this is one of his blades or not, but Aaron at Maker's Leather Supply sells these. Also on Barry's website, he also sells these. I don't know if anybody else does, so I'm not going to speak to that, but I know those two places you can get these, and they're really worth the money, especially for you guys that are hand stitching a lot of stuff. And again, I love hand stitching. I think it looks very good. It's a very good skill to have. You need to really learn that skill and become proficient at it. And so if you are hand stitching, you know, those awls and awl hafts and learn how to sharpen your awl blades are really going to help you to finely tune your stitching and make that stitching look even better. So that's our quick tip video for the week. If you got any questions, let us know. Be sure and subscribe. Don't forget to sign up for the Leathercraft newsletter, and we'll see you in the next video.